Hello, everyone. I am delighted to be here with today's guest, Adrienne Freas. Currently, the Classical Education Advisor for the K 12 Classical Curriculum and Professional Development Program at the University of Dallas, Adrienne brings 20 years of experience specializing in Charlotte Mason pedagogy to the program. She has developed and led professional development for teachers in various forms of classical philosophies and methodologies, and is active in several classical communities of educators. Adrienne's passions are helping home educators and classroom teachers by writing educational materials that help teachers understand classical philosophy and how to implement classical pedagogy. So you know why I had to have her on today. She founded and led the Charlotte Mason Book Club in Denton, Texas for 3 years. She transitioned out of homeschooling when her youngest was near graduating. And at that time, she was offered a position in a large charter school to help a dozen schools transition to a classical Charlotte Mason model. She lives in Texas with her husband of 29 years and their 2 dogs, and they enjoy spending time with their 3, soon to be 5 grandchildren. So congratulations on those new little ones. Well, Adrienne,
Thanks.
just here at the beginning, I would like to hear a little bit about your background with homeschooling, how you got started, and about you and your family.
Okay. Yeah, so I have my husband and I met in college, and we married before we were finished with college. And I actually never finished because I got pregnant about 6 months after we were married and had always been committed to being a stay-at-home mom. And also really wanted to have all my children close together because I was an only child for 10 years. And my mom and dad, we had 3 more, which I love my siblings, but I really wanted them to come when I was younger. I was like, Mom, I want a brother or sister. I really wanted siblings. So it was important to me, if possible, to have my kids close together. So I had 4 kids in 5 years. So yeah, and so that put me on the trajectory of really, figuring out, all the things you think about when you have a new baby, like, oh my goodness, I've got this little person here that I'm responsible for, and how am I going to teach this little person everything they need to know and help and pray that they love God. And so that led me down the path of really embracing homeschooling. I did put my kids in public school for a short time, for a number of reasons. But when we got married, we knew we wanted to homeschool. But having my kids so close together, I felt a little overwhelmed. And so
Understandably.
when my son was 5, I was 8 months pregnant, and kindergarten was going to be starting. And so we just decided, with nursing a newborn and having a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old who was very strong-willed, that putting him in kindergarten was a good choice for us at that time. So he did go to school till he was in 4th grade. And then at that point, and my other 2 went to school. And then at that point, we knew, okay, it's time. We've got to homeschool. We're going to homeschool. And my son, this is kind of funny, when he was 8, so he was in school when this happened. We prayed with our kids, a lot. And one day he said to me, Mom, when I grow up, I'm going to be a judge. And I said, you really think you want to be a judge? He goes, yeah, I've been praying and I think that I'm going to be a judge someday. A lot for an 8-year-old to say. Most 8-year-olds, they're going to say, I want to be a fireman, I want to be a police officer, A judge is kind of like, okay, well, what do I do with that? And so, I just started praying and asking if my son was really on that path, what would I need to do for homeschooling? So that kind of helped to shape some of the direction for him, especially. And knowing that he would need a real strong background in government and understanding American history, especially. And so over the years, we prayed with our kids, always asking year to year. One thing I loved was my husband, every summer he would fast and pray for 3 days about what are we supposed to do this year? What are we supposed to do this year? So every year from then on, it was continue to homeschool. And so for my son, he prayed as well. And over the years, he felt like he was supposed to go to law school. So he actually is 28 and is graduating from law school in May.
Oh, congratulations to
Yeah.
him.
Yeah, he got his undergrad from Patrick Henry in government, and then he got a master's in national security, and now he's going to take the bar in the summer. So, but my daughter, she didn't want to go to college. One of my daughters, my other daughter went to college. She got a 50% scholarship, graduated in 3 years with honors and a history degree. And then my younger daughter has been coming to the University of Dallas with, where I work. And she's expecting. They got married in October, and she's now expecting in August with her first. So, I think my homeschool experience with them was, I always knew that I wanted to give them the best I could. I mean, I think that's what all moms want, right? All parents want that. And we were in a position where I could stay home with them. We made a lot of sacrifices. I mean, we lived in the hood for a while, so that I could stay home. And it was a good experience. I think the thing that made it most successful for us was that I prayed a lot, and I always asked the Lord, okay, God, you know these kids better than I do. Help me to teach them what you want them to learn. Help me to stay on the path that I need to stay on to be the right parent and teacher for them. And help me not to get distracted from comparing our kids with other kids. Yeah. So an example for that would be, and I feel like I was pretty successful. This was my son. He was ready and able and wanting to read at 4 years old, and he picked it up quick. We did teach your child to read in 100 easy lessons, and in 50 out by the fifth, I think there's 100, the 100 lessons. By the 50th lesson, he took off. He was reading. Didn't work at all for my other daughter. Not at all. So I think that just really being sensitive to praying and seeking and paying attention to what your kids need is really important part of being what's the word I want to say? Like sticking with it, not quitting, not giving up, your homeschool, because it's really easy to get discouraged when you feel like a failure. When you see other kids whose kids are reading at 5, and you have a 10-year-old who still can't read past the first grade book, which I had one child that had that issue. So, it's important to be praying and really following what you sense is the right path for your child, if that makes sense. I mean, so that's kind of our little homeschool experience and background, and I hope that does that answer your question?
Yes, indeed. And I think that's such an important reminder, because if we're trying to just, pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and just power through this homeschool journey all in our own strength, without prayer, without relying on the power of the Spirit to work in our families, you're going to be exhausted and miserable, and it is going to be impossible to really, you can sprint maybe for a little bit, like in your mind, you can maybe succeed on your own strength for a little bit, but you're gonna lose heart, you're gonna lose steam, and it's not gonna work long term. So that's a really important encouragement.
It's true. And we go through phases where that happens. We go and we just need to pull it back in. Okay, wait, what am I doing here? And the scripture that really carried me through all the 15 years of homeschooling was, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. That scripture meant a lot to me, because I knew that what that meant was I needed to have peace. And so if my life was becoming chaotic, I always would step back and go, okay, wait a minute. What do I need to change or fix so that my yoke is easy and my burden is light? And so that for me really drove a lot of my decisions in how many activities we got involved in, what curriculum, how much we did of even the curriculum. Like, I think there's a stress on homeschool parents that they feel like when they buy a curriculum, they have to do all of it. Well, even in the public schools, they never finish everything. They don't even do all of it, and just by doing even half of a good curriculum, you're still giving your kids a lot. So I think realizing that was something that was also how I was able to succeed at sticking with it.
Yeah, realizing our own authority over our own homeschool, right?
Yes,
Not
right?
the curriculums.
Exactly. And the freedom and the flexibility of being able to make choices within the curriculum you use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, were you always drawn to the classical Charlotte Mason stream of education? And then how has your understanding of this philosophy of education grown and changed over the years?
Sure. Yeah. So when my kids were young, I did stumble into a Charlotte Mason group in Ohio when we lived in Ohio. And that was the first I had heard of her. And Ambleside Online was just piloting. I think this was like around 1998 or 99. No, it was a little later. It was in the early 2000s. Anyhow, yeah, that I was interested in it. I thought it was very fascinating. And what drew me to it was I have a strong background in the arts, so in ballet and in music. And my mom was a music teacher, music major. And I went to college classes with her when I was little because she was in college till I was about 10. And I just loved all of her music history classes and her art classes. And I was in ballet, and I was a very, very serious ballet dancer. And so I knew that I wanted a curriculum that had an emphasis on the humanities, not so I knew I didn't want a workbook approach. I knew I wanted an approach that was very rich in literature, but also made sense with a really rich study of pictures, art, the best art in music. And so that was my immediate draw to Charlotte Mason. Now, when it came to the curriculum, I ended up buying a boxed curriculum that was a literature approach curriculum and used that for a couple of years, but I kept going to the Ambleside Online website because they were developing it. It was getting better, and it was complicated at first. I thought it was kind of difficult. So I struggled with it, and I wanted that kind of, what do I do every day, so to help me survive. I was in that kind of mode of thinking. And what happened was, over the course of the second or third year using that program, I was using more Ambleside, and I would say, well, we don't really like this book. We're going to set it aside. We're going to use this one. And so after I was realizing that half of my books were tossed aside to use books from Ambleside, I just made the dive and switched to Ambleside Online. And I was starting to understand it better. And I had started to read Charlotte Mason's original books, which made a huge difference, because when I did this, there were no podcasts. We didn't have a computer. I mean, we didn't have a computer until, 2003, maybe. So, and then even then there were a few years where we didn't even have internet, and I took the kids to the library on Wednesdays and we did 1 hour of internet.
Wow.
That was probably around 2008, 9, somewhere in there. So, I had to learn Charlotte Mason on my own. I had to read her books, and of course was drawn straight to it first with The Children's Sake. For the Children's Sake, everybody, that's the book that kind of draws everybody to Charlotte Mason, and rightfully so. And then reading her from 6, and I got in actually a pretty big homeschool support group in Frisco, Texas. And I met some moms, and they were starting like a group for new homeschoolers. Every week would be a different meeting for different types of homeschooling options. And it was very interesting. And this one lady, Kim Neve, shared about how Charlotte Mason works. And she had a Charlotte Mason book group that at her house. And Lynn Bruce, one of the Ambleside advisory creators, was also part of that group. And so I started going to those meetings off and on. I didn't go all the time, but I went pretty regularly. And, we were just reading one chapter a month through Charlotte Mason. And that made a huge difference for me to be able to understand and apply. And of course, I didn't apply everything all at once. That's another thing as a new homeschooler. And this is, if it's so new to you, it's like drinking from a fire hose. Fire hydrant, and it's a lot. And so you just kind of have to, like, if you try to drink from the whole fire hose, you're just gonna drown. You literally are gonna fall on the ground and you're not gonna make it. So you kind of, if you're gonna drink from the fire hose, go and drink a little bit, And so I was already doing good books and having the kids listen to music and look at some art here and there. Narration was hard. That was a big one that was hard for me to dive into. Nature journaling which we'll talk about a little bit. I wanted to get into that a little bit and how we failed at nature journaling, but did fine at nature study. So I think just taking what you can and doing what you can in little bites. You can't eat an elephant all at once. Yeah. So doing as much as you can is was what worked for me with implementing the change. Because if you're not used to that approach and it's new to you, it's so very, very different. I mean, I'm a product of public school, right? So it's a completely different pedagogy, completely different philosophy of education. But I was drawn to it because of its beauty and its humane way of helping a child learn how to love everything. Not just learn, but learn how to be a human, learn how to have, you know, like Charlotte Mason says, the science of relations. And, you know, an art is something you do, a science is something you know. So if you look at the science of relations as knowing, it's a knowing of knowing relationships. It's a deep connection. And I understood that, and I liked that. And I was like, whatever I can give my kids to help them have a mind-to-mind connection and a relationship with what they're learning, that's the kind of education that I want to give them. And so Charlotte Mason was definitely my first draw. And then Karen Glass wrote her book, Consider This. And I read that and was just so excited to see her making a strong connection to the classical world, because at that time I had started leading a Charlotte Mason book group in Flower Mound, Texas, which is now the Denton, Texas Charlotte Mason book group. And a lot of the moms who were coming to those meetings were involved in another little kind of classical homeschool co-op group. And they would come to the Charlotte Mason meetings and go, wow, this is a very different approach than what we're doing in our other classical, but yet Karen Glass's book was talking classical. And so we had talked with, you know, at our Charlotte Mason book group, what a liberal education is and how a liberal education is a classical education and what a liberal education really looks like. And so I helped some of these moms as we were unpacking the ideas that Karen Glass wrote about, the ideas of what Charlotte Mason wrote about, seeing the connection to what a classical education really is rooted in, which is kind of the new movement, which is more progressive, which is different. And even Susan Weiss Bauer, who is, I think, one of the leaders of the neoclassical movement, says she is neoclassical and that she also is declared a progressive. So that is going to look different than the liberal arts classical approach of the medieval model, which is more similar to what Charlotte Mason's approach is. And so I dove into reading. I wanted to help sort of perpetuate some of the questions I saw happening and coming up from Karen Glass's book within my circle of people. And I thought, well, the only way to really do that and to answer their questions is for me to dive myself into the original writers who the liberal arts tradition came from. So I started reading Plato and Aristotle and Quintilian and Augustine and diving in. And as I dove in, I was looking specifically for Charlotte Mason, for her ways, because I understood her pedagogy. And as I was doing that, oh my goodness, all the margins of my book, I have little CM for Charlotte Mason with arrows to so many things. I'm like, Charlotte Mason, oh, she read these guys, you know, there's no doubt about it. So that's where I started to see that there was such a real connection to classical education in the Charlotte Mason pedagogy. And I mean, I guess it would be helpful. I kind of wrote down here a little bit about explaining what a liberal arts education is. Do you think that would be helpful for your listeners?
Sure. Why don't you explain what you mean when you say a liberal arts education?
Sure. So a liberal arts education helps students to prepare and pursue the things that matter, which is exactly what Charlotte Mason wanted us to do, pursuing the things that matter. And that's the heart of a liberal education. And it's all about relationships and seeking the good and gaining and understanding wisdom. So as humans, we were created to have relationships, and we were designed by God to pursue the virtues and a goodness, which is virtues, and then to pursue truth, which is Christ. And we were created to pursue the beautiful, which is the invitation for us to be unified and harmonious with our education and the whole world around us and the people around us. And so that's the heart, the true, the good, and the beautiful of a liberal arts education. And that's the heart of a Charlotte Mason education. So I don't really see a divide in that at all. So the liberal arts focus on truth, goodness, and beauty, which, these are the big buzzwords. Everybody, you go to visit a classical school, truth, good, but nobody can really explain what that means, right? But goodness is really rooted in virtues, and in the virtues that God, because we were created in the image of God, we were created in his image. We have those virtues in us. But as parents and educators, we have to help bring that out. And, Christ came to show us how to live the virtuous life. He came to show us that. And we are called to model and be Christ-like. So that's kind of where the good comes in. And then Christ is the truth. So he's truth incarnate. And then beauty is the seeking of everything around us that's harmonious and unified and not chaotic. It's the opposite of chaos. So that's where this liberal arts tradition really brings those together in the way a child is educated and in the materials the child is given to learn from. So this was the medieval way of education of the early church, in the monastic practices, in the schools. And these are very similar to the methods that Charlotte Mason implemented, and she called it also a liberal arts education. So some of the ways that a liberal arts education is rooted is in that they have a high view of man. Charlotte Mason said children are born persons. They're made in the image of God. They're beautiful. We shouldn't have a lowly view of them. We should think much of children and expect much from them. So that high view of man is really important in a liberal arts approach. Aspiring to the transcendentals, which is truth, goodness, and beauty, and then to awaken beauty and stir up the poetic imagination and wonder in a child, and helping them look at something and wonder more about it, to awaken them to want to know more. That's the heart of a liberal education. And that's the heart of what we hear when we read Plato, when we read Quintilian, Augustine even. That it's the soul and the spirit embodying the truth and the goodness and beauty of the being of God. That God is true, God is good, God is beautiful, and as being, these are what we want our whole life to encompass. And so that is the heart, I think, of a liberal education. And so then when you look at the 7 liberal arts, you have the Trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and then you have the Quadrivium, which is arithmetic, music, astronomy, and geometry. And so together they signify that a person has mastered a language. So in Trivium, it's mastery of language. In Quadrivium, it's mastery of number. But you have to master language to master number. You have to be able to speak and communicate in order to learn math. Mm-hmm. So together, that's kind of what makes up the 7 liberal arts. So I see Mason as incorporating all of that in her program. She referred to it as a feast. And to put this generous feast out before the children. And we shouldn't keep any of the feast from them. We should, even if there's something in the feast we don't like, we should still have it there for them. And that's one of the hard parts about homeschooling with Charlotte Mason, is you think, well, I'm not good at poetry, or I don't like Shakespeare, or I'm going to skip that, But I have found and read even from other moms time and time again, and I'm not a huge Shakespeare fan, but who am I to know whether one of my kids would love it, right? So I think that's another important part about Charlotte Mason that I like, because it becomes very humane in allowing the child to experience a rich feast and grow into who they're supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
So
one of the things that really draws me to Christian classical education, what I love about it is so many of these things that you were speaking of, how really, if we're talking about Christian classical education in particular, which really is the only kind of classical education I'm interested in doing, but It is all rooted in the character of God himself, who he is. Those words, truth, goodness, and beauty. It's about the character of God. He defines those terms. And so that gives meaning and a framework then as we look at the creation that then he made, right, to point back to himself as we learn to be more fully human, how he designed us to be, and those image bearers of God.
Right.
And then to really draw us to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, which is wisdom. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And then to love our neighbor as ourselves, that our education is driving us to more and more humility and doxology, if I can put it that way, but to worshiping God and then acting, serving, our neighbor, those around us. And so I think that of all the approaches to education, that's why I choose to educate my children the way I do, because I think that it most helpfully points us in that direction and equips us in those ways.
Right. That's so true.
Now, you talked a little bit about the 7 liberal arts, so Trivium and Quadrivium. I'd like to hear a little bit more about your thoughts on the Trivium, which is sort of a term that again, all these terms that get thrown around a lot, as often thought of as a curriculum, and there's an aspect of that, but it's also a pedagogy, so a means of teaching. Could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So we, a lot of people are familiar with the Trivium through the essay that Dorothy Sayers wrote. And she really was not, I don't believe she was ever intending for her essay to be taken literally as, oh, this is how we're going to set up all these classical schools.
Right.
It was more just, and she said, it's just an idea, and she was making some connections to the progressive, movement of education, of cognition and how kids learn, in stages. And, it was a neat idea and a great conversation. I'd love to have a Socratic seminar about it, but it's not really the way the Trivium was set up in the medieval model, and the way, and she knew that because she was a medievalist. So in the medieval model, when you go back and you look at, you can see the Trivium unpacked in Plato, even though it's not called the Trivium. And when you go back and you look at how it was taught in the early monastic schools in the medieval ages, and you see it unpacking and see the writings of, I read several of them. Consolation of Philosophy and Boethius unpacks some of it. The name is slipping me, but I have it. It's the allegory. I'll come up with it. Anyhow, I've read it. What you see is that the Trivium activates more as modes of thinking. So the art of imitating, which is called mimesis, is really the grammar mode. So in the grammar mode, students are imitating. So we'll hear, this is where you do memory work and recitation, drilling. But it's not, the heart of drilling isn't really what the grammar mode is. The grammar mode is more the when you are learning something new, okay? You're gathering the information, you're learning, seeing harmony and beauty and ordering, and you learn to imitate. So if you're going to learn how to crochet, you first, in your mind, learn it through the grammar mode. You start imitating what you see. You follow a pattern, or you follow somebody else is doing it in front of you and helping you shape your hands to do the crocheting. And this is with anything, learning how to cook, anything. And it can happen at any age. So to categorize grammar as being a K-5 activity, a cognitive activity, limits what the Trivium really is. So if you look at grammar as a mode of thought, and it's kind of the beginning phases of learning something new, no matter how old you are going to always activate the full Trivium as modes of thinking when you're learning something. So looking at it more as an art rather than a tool. So it's not really a lost tool, it's a lost art. So, and that was her essay, was the lost tools of learning. And so if we look at it as an art or a skill, skill, and art is a skill that we're learning, it's something we are doing, it changes kind of how you're going to teach and what the curriculum is going to look like. Okay, so grammar, when we're talking about grammar, we're not talking about grammar in identifying parts of speech, right? We're talking about it as a mode. And so this is where you're learning to imitate something really well. And it's the foundation of habit training as well. So the foundation of learning new habits and getting those habits set is very much a part of the grammar mode. And so when this is happening in the mind, you're making discoveries, you're asking questions, you're wondering, and you're learning to imitate that which is good and true and beautiful. And that's where Charlotte Mason comes in about wanting the kids to only be exposed to the things that are beautiful, the best of everything. And so as a curriculum, the grammar mode happens when you're doing copy work, when you're doing anything beautiful for the sake of beauty, not just for the sake of regurgitating facts. So recitation falls in there, but recitation first and primarily ought to be the work of developing habits of the mind towards things that are beautiful, not just facts that you need to learn. Does that make sense?
Oh, definitely. And that's something we are passionate about around here at Humility and Doxology. We love to encourage focus on memorizing, beautiful poems and, wonderful speeches. And that is certainly
Right.
a huge part of my own homeschool. Yeah.
Right. And it's not something that you just do for K-5. It's all the way through, even as an adult. You should
Right.
be working on that. So it's not something that you're ever done doing. So that's what I'm talking about. It's different than just this stage of learning at a certain age. And oh boy, if you go into 5th grade at a classical school and you didn't go to the grammar school, oh, you're never going to succeed now because you missed all of it. No, that's not how we're wired. We're a lot more complex than just boxing us into stages, right?
Yeah. Oh,
And
definitely.
so then the dialectic or logic is the art of thinking. So we've got the art of imitating for grammar, then we've got the art of thinking. This is where you're learning to reason, internalize, and understand and develop skills. So even a 2-year-old is doing this. They're learning how to reason. They learn how to try to change your mind about things. They may not be great at it, but they're doing it.
Yeah.
And so in this stage, this is where we go into the maieutic mode. And the maieutic is just simply a midwifery and birthing, helping to birth a child. So Plato talks about this in one of his dialogues, Theaetetus, and I know I'm not saying that correctly, but in that dialogue, he talks about his mom or his grandmother is a midwife and how the midwife is there to help birth the child. She's not doing the work of birthing the child. She's doing the guiding and the coaching to help the mom birth the child. So it's called maieutic. It's just the Greek word for, so we could also call that Socratic. So Socratic teaching, Socratic dialogues. So if as a teacher or a coach, when you're having a discussion with a child or a student, the maieutic mode, thinking mode, the questions ought to be questions that don't necessarily tell the child what, like, you have to be super careful with learning how to ask the right questions and not just, oh, I wish I had examples in front of me because I teach on this. I teach teachers on this. I'm blanking right now. You're not asking those kind of questions that are on a worksheet, right? Like
the easy fill in the blanks.
Yeah, I mean, what did Charlotte have for breakfast? Charlotte's pig or something. What did the mother put on the table? I remember that was one of the questions. And so just to see if they've read the story or listened. That's not the point. The point is more the bigger questions. And Charlotte Mason's questions are fantastic for that. All of her exam questions are on the Ambleside online website. If you go into their library, you go into the Ambleside website, go to their library, and you scroll all the way down to the bottom. You'll see these Charlotte Mason exams, and all of her exam questions are just fantastic, open-ended types of questions. Those are maieutic questions. And so that's in that dialectic and logic mode, the student is going into that mode of birthing an idea. The aha moment is beginning to happen, right? So that as a curriculum is where you're going to have your dynamic Socratic dialogues. But equally important to that is quiet contemplative time, where you're not saying anything and being okay with silence. and allowing the student to have time to ruminate what they've learned. And this happens when you're asking a student to narrate as well. So when you're asking them to narrate, they're having to think through the process of ordering and reasoning and developing what they're going to say. And so that quiet contemplative time is very much a part of the dialectic and logic mode of thinking. So it's not just about talking and asking questions, it's also about having quiet time. And in the mind, you're going back and forth. The grammar and dialectic mode are very much going back and forth, and same then when you add the rhetorical mode. So the rhetoric is the art of communicating. So we've got art of imitating, art of thinking, the art of communicating. And in this mode, we're applying the truth of an idea through creating and performing and learning to wisely express and eloquently express the truth. So that does take time to learn, but giving students the opportunity to do rhetoric when they're very young is important. They need to learn how to express their ideas and order these ideas. So in the mode and what's happening in the mind, this is the act of poiesis. And poiesis is a Greek word, which means it's the act of creating something that did not exist before. Okay. Also, one of the books, Poetics by Aristotle, the translation I have, he says that poiesis is the thing that is made, but it's also the act of making it. So if you can think about when a student does a response to a lesson, it is a rhetorical response because they're creating a response to that. So this is where they're formally ordering the knowledge so that it can be communicated. Okay. This is where students show their work. So in curriculum, they're showing their work. So it's very, I think, a lot simpler to and a lot more humane to see the Trivium in this way. And I think it's very much in line with Charlotte Mason's approach to look at the Trivium as this type of pedagogy and curriculum unfolding in this way. Does that make sense? Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I think that it's very helpful and very important to see that they're not these, boxes that are completely categorized separately from one another, that these are modes of thinking that often overlap, and that you're not just restricted to one at a time. I mean, I think even like in my own family, we begin early on encouraging some reading journals is what we call them. Essentially, they're, written narrations. And at first when a child is doing that, it may just be copy something you think is like a key idea, which then, they're actually having to think about all those different modes of thinking about what they read, but then they're not having to come up with, their own unique things. They're just learning. But then as they get older and they get more practice with that, having to then be able to communicate the idea in their own words. And you think, well, that seems so almost too easy. Like it should be more complicated than that.
Right, but it's not.
It's not, yeah. Which is pretty great. Right. I like things not complicated. Well, I want to transition a little bit here because when you and I first chatted, and this has been several months ago now, but we had all these delightful rabbit trails in our conversation. And one of those rabbit trails took us down the path of talking about nature study and picture study. And so I want to ask, are those really necessary? Are they important and necessary in our homeschool? And then if a mom is like, well, maybe they're important, but I just feel completely inadequate to implement these in our homeschool, what would you say to that mama?
Sure. So in picture study is easy and delightful. Everybody loves picture study. So when I train teachers and we start doing picture study, it's fun. And then when I do surveys, I get surveys back. The reactions, everybody loves picture study. The kids love it. The teachers love it. The parents love it. And what picture study has done for so many students, especially in a classroom, and I think it'd be something that you would see at home as well, is that it allows students who are otherwise more afraid to answer a question because they're afraid they're going to be wrong to open up, because you're asking them, narrate what you saw in the picture. And everybody's like, oh, I want to share. Everybody sees something, right? And so it becomes this very dynamic and beautiful way of helping students to engage the ability to well, the ability to see beauty, the ability to express what they see. I mean, seeing and looking really help cultivate, and contemplation is so important, and it's something we're missing in our culture right now. We're just slammed by everything's so fast, and I think really taking the time to help children learn to contemplate is more important now than it has ever been, actually. And I think picture study and nature study both lend themselves to teaching the habit of contemplation. And so they love it. Kids love it. And I was telling you before, one of my favorite places for pictures to buy picture studies, and some of them are free, is on a website called a Humble Place, humbleplace.com. She does wonderful picture study prints there. Very affordable. Some of her stuff is free downloads, and great resource for picture study. And she gives little biographical sketches of the artists, and it's a great source for that. So I think that picture study is something that's important not to skip. Even if it's just one day a week, it really is important. And it's one of those activities that you can do to help sort of slow down the family, to just, okay. And you can do it at the dinner time with the dad home too, right? So it's a way to involve a dad and not a really hugely academic way of learning. And what's interesting that happens is the more you do picture study, the more you start to enjoy and understand what beauty is. And the more you look outside of yourself, it draws you out of yourself and into a relationship with everything around you. And one of the fun side benefits of picture study is that kids who do this, and I've gotten this testimony from teachers, is when they take them to the museum, the kids will recognize pictures and say, oh, that's a Renoir, you know?
Yeah.
So if you want to impress that apprehensive grandmother who doesn't think homeschooling is good, do picture study and then have the grandma take them to the art museum.
Oh, I love it.
Right? Yeah. So it is a very important activity, one that shouldn't be missed. Especially if you're a parent who allows your kids to watch some TV, who allows your kids to do some gaming or internet things, which I'm fine with. But if you are allowing that, you especially need to do picture study. It especially should not be skipped because they need to learn to slow down. So in allowing that space and that comfort of, what did you notice? What did you wonder? What does it remind you of? So these are the three key questions to get an engaged conversation going, is what did you notice? What did you wonder? What did it remind you of? And when you do picture study, you should turn the picture, like give them a few minutes to look at it quietly, and then turn it over and have everybody tell something they noticed. And that's where the conversation starts, because then they're like, well, they want to turn it back over and look, and don't let them turn it over. Because you got to get through, what did you notice? What did you wonder? And then by the time you're done having that conversation, everybody's dying to look at the picture again because they didn't notice that and they want to see, you know, the snail that Joey saw that they, you know, so it opens up this dynamic, fun conversation. It becomes dialectic. And so, so that's why I think picture study is important. And your other question, I think, was about nature study.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So yeah, nature study, I think, is very, very important as well for contemplation. I went on a walk yesterday simply just to sit outside and watch birds. I took an hour and I just went for a walk, and I found a bench and I just sat there and I just watched and listened. Just watched and listened. And I heard at least 20 different birds, and I heard the wind in the trees, you know. Then I heard this clicking behind me, and I turned around and there was a little squirrel just eating off of the tree. And it just, there's something about just getting fresh air, going outside and sitting. And that's really hard with little ones because they want to go everywhere and they're all over the place. And that's okay. But taking the time to just go outside and give something to pay attention to. Let's just look for one thing that we can pay attention to is important. Now, one of the things that I thought was super discouraging as a homeschool mom was this idea of nature notebooks. I was like, there's no way, I'm not an artist. I cannot do it. This is not happening. So we actually didn't do nature notebooks for a long time, but we did nature study. So I want moms to feel like even if they don't have time to do this whole program of, this is where it goes back to, if you're a person who thinks you have to do the whole curriculum or not at all, no, just go outside, find a blade of grass, just make it simple. It doesn't have to be, we totally failed in notebooking in our home. I do it now, but we failed as, when the kids were growing up, we didn't do great at it. My youngest daughter, I think got it. I think I finally succeeded by the time I did it with my fourth. We got some good nature journal going. They're not beautiful by any means, but the habit of being still and recognizing that the world is big and it's not all about me is so important. And that's something that you shouldn't skip. So this is why I think nature study is important. And a failure to do notebooking is never a good excuse to skip nature study, or a failure to do it formally. Now, there are some good, I want to share my raindrop story, right?
Yes. I love that story.
Yeah, so I went to this John Muir Laws. He's a wonderful resource. He has great free stuff online. So you can look up John Muir. It's Muir Laws. And he has great videos on YouTube talking about nature journaling. Now, his nature journals are beautiful and fancy, so don't let that intimidate you, but it's still worth looking at and watching. And his videos are great too. And his materials are free. I went to his conference, and it was the Charlotte Mason conference, and he was there, and he said, hey, you know what? It rained last night, and there's lots of raindrops outside on the ground and on the leaves. Let's just go out in just groups of 3 or 4 and look at find one drop of water and study it. And that was the assignment. So it was very random. He didn't plan it. It rained, so that was what we were going to do. So we went out in groups of 3 or 4, and we were standing at a tree. In my little group, we found this one raindrop on this one leaf. We all said, okay, we're going to look at that raindrop. And we all got really close, and we were all staring at the little raindrop. And we were noticed. I was like, so he said, talk about what you noticed and what you wonder, and what does it remind you of? That's where I got the 3 questions. And I looked at the raindrop, and I started describing what I noticed, and I was noticing a reflection, and I was describing the reflection I was seeing. And the lady standing on this side of the raindrop was looking at it, and she goes, well, that's not what I see. I see this. And she starts describing her perspective of what was being reflected in the raindrop, which was completely different than mine. And I said, what? There's no way. So I said, change places. So we switched places. And sure enough, I was seeing everything she saw. She was seeing everything I saw. And that to me was my mind-blowing lesson in understanding human relationships with people who have different perspectives. Yeah. And so that was mind-blowing to me. Just, it totally changed how I see other people's perspectives. Totally changed it. And I was blown away, I'm still blown away by how much you can see in a little raindrop. Everything behind you is reflected in it. And it's this beautiful little picture. But what is mind-blowing to me too is that you can go to the other side and see something completely different. It's not going through the raindrop. So I still am wondered, I'm still mind-boggled at how in the world a raindrop does that. And I'm sure some high-level chemist or physicist could explain it to me. But what's good about that is it awakened my desire to know more. Yeah. Right? And that's the idea, that a child maybe then would want to know more and would want to go study and investigate. And so there you are, you're awakening a desire for science lesson. So that's what Charlotte Mason means when it becomes very natural. And that's what I mean when I say just find something. You're going to find something. And if you have a plan for something, go for it. If you find something else on the way, let that happen. So one of the schools we work with, a teacher had this beautiful nature lesson plan. She had turned it into her principal. She was doing this lesson plan. And when they got outside, the little girl, a ladybug came and flew and landed on her arm. And so the entire nature lesson that she had planned was scratched, set aside for another day, when there isn't something to find, Right. But when you have those moments where the wonder happens and the students want to know, drop your formally planned lesson and go with where the kids are, or where you see something, you know, that's important. That's why having a checklist is dangerous,
Yes,
because you can
especially
get
if,
so married to that checklist and feel like a failure if you don't do it, right?
yeah.
So you can have checklists, but have them loose, carry them very loosely. Be willing to let whatever disaster happens in the day interrupt your checklist because you're dealing with little people. And the same goes with your lessons. Let the glory and the wonder of God's creation around you happen, if it happens. So yeah, and I have a list of some ideas and things for nature notebooks. Do you want me to share them here, or do you want to put them on your website?
How about if you send those to me and I'll make sure that they're in the show notes for this
Okay.
episode.
Yeah,
We'll have the transcript and the show notes over at humilityanddoxology.com.
because
So
I have just a couple of real simple books I think are good to start with, and some good materials for watercolors and good notebooks to start
yeah, oh, that will be fantastic. That will be great. Well, I love those 3 questions from John Muir Laws too. And actually, when you're listening to this podcast, guys, go back in your podcast feed to the episode I did with Jennifer Dow about poetry, because Jennifer brought up those exact same questions, and she was using it in the context of helping your children think about a poem in the same kind of these words: wonder, curiosity. These are the words that keep coming up from all of my guests, no matter what topic we're talking about, because really that's what we're wanting to nurture in our children. So I loved those questions, and just to think about, and then you can use them with picture study and nature study. Like I just think pretty much you use those 3 questions and you've got your homeschool curriculum.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. It's true. You can do the same thing when you're teaching a math lesson and get the kids to start teaching the math lesson to you.
Yes, indeed. Well, you have touched on this several times already, but this feeling of overwhelm for the homeschool mom, where there's this feeling like we have to do all of the things, or we have to do them all the right way, this all or nothing. If we're not doing it just the way I saw it listed on this website, then it doesn't really count. If you were talking to a mom, especially maybe one who's new to homeschooling in general, or new to some of these classical ideas, where would you encourage her to start?
So I recommend for moms who are new to homeschooling to, well, start with For the Children's Sake by Susan Schaefer Macaulay, because she really does a great job at setting forth a Christian humane education for children. And then Charlotte Mason's Volume 6. I can't emphasize enough how much, if you want to use a Charlotte Mason approach, to actually read Charlotte Mason and not go looking for all the blogs and all the podcasts about Charlotte Mason and all the books about Charlotte Mason, but just actually read Charlotte Mason. I think that's just super important. And it goes with her philosophy, which is to read the original author. So, and if Charlotte Mason's writing is too daunting, there's a couple of options. One is on the Ambleside online website. They have an abridged kind of summarized version, but they also have a modern translation. So if you go Ambleside Charlotte Mason original series, and at the top of the page, you can click on the modern translation. And I had to do that for a while until I got used to the language, and I would read both. I would try to read the original, I'd get confused, and then I'd go read the modern translation, and that helped a lot. Eventually I bought the books, but for a while, just getting started, I was reading what I could for free on the Ambleside website. And then also Cindy Rowland's Mere Motherhood is a good place to start. It's an encouraging book. It's her story of homeschooling and what it really looks like. And knowing what it really looks like can be really encouraging, I think, to especially a new homeschooler, so that they don't have their hopes too high. Just know, one of the wisest pieces of advice that I got from another homeschooling mom was just know that the first 2 years is going to be a wash. Like, you're going to feel like you accomplished absolutely nothing. And you just need to know, but you're retraining children in habits, especially if you're pulling them out of a school. You're having to kind of reset, retrain in habits, getting a whole new routine, getting to know each other because they've been in school. So that's what I had to deal with. So for me, it was hard. So just kind of knowing that and being okay with it is an important place to start. If you can find a local support group, that's also really helpful. I was thankful that I had a local support group. I know not everybody does. Like my daughter, she's military. So it's really difficult for her to connect with people locally, which is why it's great for the fact that we have such a mobile society now. It's great that there are those podcasts and, Facebook pages of Charlotte Mason groups and things. Those are super helpful. That we didn't used to have that, but we weren't as mobile as we are now. So encouraging to join those. But there are debates within the Charlotte Mason circles. So it is really important for you to read her works yourself if you're interested in using her way of teaching. The other thing is, if you want to know what other education philosophies are out there, you just need to do some research. And look at them all and compare them, and find what you think is best for you, for your family's needs. For a time, the boxed curriculum worked for me. It's kind of where I was, right? And if that's where you need to start to ease your way into this approach, start there. There's some good literature boxed curriculums out there that are literary based, that have lots of books. If you want to go that approach, one of the great things about Ambleside Online that I love is there's so many more resources now that there didn't used to be. So they do the weekly schedule, and you would just have to kind of pace out your own week, what you want that to look like. I like that it doesn't have a daily schedule, because you can sort of make it fit for your family, and you can make 1 week stretch to 2 weeks if you need to. I like the flexibility in that, but I think there are moms now who have created 1 week schedules that you can find them if you look for them. If you get on a good Charlotte Mason page and ask where those are located, but we just didn't have them. So if you wanted something to help you go day by day, you had to buy it. They didn't have that. So then I also recommend the Literary Life podcast with Angelina Stanford and Cindy Rollins. It's a great podcast for you as a mom to dive into some books and have, get to hear conversations with adults, which you kind of need as a mom. And to participate, they have a really vibrant Facebook page where you can sort of post questions about, books you're reading that are literature books, and it doesn't have to be a book that they're reading on their podcast either. We all kind of post. It's a very vibrant Facebook page and very fun, and I think can be a really good sort of mental support for a new mom. So, yeah. So that's kind of where I would recommend starting. But if you have a local homeschool support group, by all means, try to find it and plug in if you can.
Yeah, I think those in real life communities are so important. And I actually see them being slightly undervalued as a second generation homeschooler. I grew up with a real relational focus, and we didn't all have to agree on the same educational philosophy anyway, but it was really a focus on relationship. And now it doesn't seem, I don't notice that as much now, unfortunately.
That's true. When I was part of a local homeschool group that everybody was using all different philosophies, and we would just have a local once a month. So I was in the Charlotte Mason group because we had a local group, which not everybody does, in this larger group, and they would have, monthly support meetings with general topics, and it was helpful. And it's just good to get out and meet other moms who feel, the same struggles you feel, that, dirty diapers, kids thrown up,
Yeah. And those people, when someone's sick or you have a new baby, they're going to be the ones who can bring food to your doorstep. The so virtual community can't.
That's true. And they do. So yeah, I think that getting that support group, especially if you don't have, family members on board, my mom was on board, my mother-in-law was on board, and that was super helpful. But if you don't have that, it's even more important, I think. Yeah.
Well, Adrienne, this has been such a helpful conversation. And here, as we come to the close, I'm going to ask you the same questions I've been asking all of my guests this season. And so the first question is just, what are you reading lately?
Yeah, so I just finished The Betrothed by Manzoni. And that was it's a book set in the Black Plague in Italy. And it was a very good book. I read it because several people from my church were reading it, wanting to have kind of a little book group discussion, and it was fun, and I had never read it, and it's a classic. It's fantastic. So I just finished that. But now I am reading The Ethics of Beauty, which is a fantastic, I strongly recommend the book. So it's pretty big and meaty, but it's very, very good. But I like this kind of book, and I'm doing a talk on truth, goodness, and beauty at a conference in October at a homeschool, classical homeschool, or not homeschool, but a classical conference. And I'm doing a big talk on beauty and atmosphere and how important beauty is to set the stage for your entire atmosphere of your learning environment. And so I felt like I need to read this book, and it's a lot better than I thought it would be. It's really good. So that I'm also reading Unbinding Prometheus by Donald Cowan. He used to be the president of the University of Dallas, and he and his wife developed sort of the whole teaching on the poetic imagination and getting the whole core program at UD developed, which is a great program. The core program is where all students are reading the same books. So everybody reads Paradise Lost, everybody's reading Plato, everybody. So it's kind of about half of your degree is this core program. And it's nice because everybody's doing it. And so everybody has this commonality that they can talk about. So Donald Cowan and Louise Cowan founded the core program here, and they also founded the Dallas Institute. And so I've heard a lot of good about this book, but I had never read it. And I just picked it up, started reading it, and it's fantastic. And it's very approachable. So I feel like it's if you want to learn and understand sort of the spirit of classical education, this is a really good read. And you can just read a chapter. There's no order that you really have to read it to. So last night or a couple of days, I read The Spirit of Liberal Learning all kind of on its own. It's a very good chapter. And then the next chapter is called The 3 Moments of Learning, which is also excellent. And he actually, as I unfolded this, I'm like, the 3 moments of learning is the Trivium in the 3 modes of thinking. Yes. But he didn't call it that, but I'm like, that's exactly what it is. It's really good. So that's another one I'm reading that's great. And I would like to read a quote, if it's okay.
Yes, please.
From this one. He said, from Unbinding Prometheus, he said, enjoyment is the true response to learning, an internal and reflective activity that, touching on a higher harmony outside the soul, resonates in the soul and affects its transformation. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly Charlotte Mason. That's what Charlotte Mason does for students. And that's what a classical education should do for students. It's not just about the mom having a checklist, but it's about enjoyment. And I want to say one thing about enjoyment. It's not the same as fun activity. As humans, we're designed to enjoy contemplating ideas. We should enjoy having time to ruminate. It brings the soul formation into like a deeper enjoyment that at first may not look enjoyable, if that makes sense.
Right.
So, helping kids learn habits is really, really hard. But once they do it, they'll actually enjoy life more. So when we can learn to do something well, that's an enjoyment. And I think that's kind of what he means by that quote. So I just thought that was a really good quote from that book.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I have his wife's book, Invitation to the Classics.
Yes.
She co-wrote that maybe was that with Oz Guinness or something? I can't remember, but it's a great resource. But I didn't realize the connection with your college and everything. So that's cool.
Yeah. Her book is a good resource. This book is more of a good read for philosophy of classical education.
Yeah.
And now the other one I'm reading again, which I read all the time, is Quintilian's Institutes of Oratory. I like that book, and there's a lot in there about how to teach little kids, especially narration and copy work. The habits of learning how to read, write, and speak well are all in there. And I see the Trivium in. So I'm kind of unpacking it again and looking for the Trivium in that book as kind of a way to support some of my thesis on the Trivium as modes of thinking.
Yes.
So I'm reading that one again. But those are my three main reads right now. So
it all sounds delightful. Well, final question here is just, what tips would you give to the mom whose homeschool day seems to be going completely off the rails?
Yeah, so I wrote down my response because I had a memory of a day that it was going off the rails for me. So I'm going to kind of read what I wrote here. I said, well, I had 4 kids in 5 years, so many of my days were going all wrong constantly. I have a daughter who's following suit and is pregnant with baby number 3, currently has a 1-year-old and an almost 3-year-old. So really just adapting to all the hard things is how you survive. having a routine is very helpful, but being very, very flexible with that routine is the most important way to help you keep your sanity. If you're too rigid with checklists and routines, you can quickly feel like a failure and get burned out. I remember when I was coming home from the grocery store shopping with 4 kids, 5 and under. I was putting all the groceries away and my baby was crying because she wanted to nurse, but I had to put the cold stuff away. I dropped an entire gallon of milk, and of course it exploded all over the kitchen floor and went under the refrigerator. I remember that I just stopped and I started to laugh. I called the dog into the kitchen. I threw 2 towels around the bottom of the refrigerator, and while the dog happily lapped up what she could, I took my baby out of the car seat, lifted the mess to go quietly nurse her. And I think that the gift of nursing a baby forced me to slow down and learn how to let go of things. So homeschooling is the hardest thing you will ever do. It's harder than natural childbirth, which I did. You'll be so tired that you have no idea who you are anymore, but just stopping, praying, even if the only chance you get to pray is when you're going to the bathroom, cry out to God, help me and show me how to be the mom my kids need because I don't know how, and he'll meet you. And so that's how I did it.
That is such an encouragement. And thank you for sharing that story too. I know that there's a mom right now who's like laugh crying because she probably has something like that happened to her this week. So it's good to just remember that we're not alone and that we can just stop and pray and continue on.
And it's normal.
Yes.
It's
yes.
normal.
No one is a perfect superhuman homeschool mom. That does not exist.
No. And the husband came home later and pulled the refrigerator out and cleaned underneath. I didn't have to do it. And the dog got everything out that was in the kitchen. So, you do what you got to do. You just laugh.
Yes, laughter is good medicine. Well, Adrienne, this has been lovely. Thank you again, especially with the technical issues we had there in the middle. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat today. Where can people find you around the internet?
Oh, thanks for having me. This was fun. Well, I'm on Facebook. So I follow lots of different little Facebook pages. I have a Facebook page called Classical Education. Like, what is classical education? It's just, if you just type in Facebook classical education, then it should come up with a picture of a stack of books that says, what is classical education? That's actually my page. I started it. Okay. So it's kind of a generic page. I let people really post just about anything about classical ed. It's not just Charlotte Mason, but I kind of use it as my little platform to be able to plug some Charlotte Mason things here and there.
Yes.
So that's probably the best place. And then my name on Facebook is Adrienne Marie, M-A-R-I-E, Marie, but I don't normally like to take friend requests from people I don't know, but if
I don't either. No, that's creepy.
Watch my name on the Classical Ed Facebook page, and I'm on the Angelina Stanford Literary Podcast Life page. And if you have a Facebook page, I ought to get on there too.
Yes.
So.
And I will have links to all of that in the show notes for this episode. And then, of course, if anyone has any questions for you, they can comment on the blog post, which will include the full transcript as well, and links to the many things that we've talked about today. And I'll make sure if anyone sends a question there, I'll make sure that gets to you.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks.
Thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon.